It is I, Mark, aka the Arachnoholic, coming at you guys from St. Augustine, Florida with a brand new video. This is my top 5 best beginner species of tarantula. So before I go ahead and get into the video though, I want to break down for you guys how I'm going to be gauging each of these species in terms of how ideal it is for a beginner hobbyist. So the first way I'm going to be measuring them is of course going to be temperament. Ease of care will be next. Then we will have availability, and then finally upfront costs. And of course, being that these are all New World tarantulas, they will have weak to mild venom, so a trip to the ER is nothing to worry about. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to this one. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. Let's go ahead and dive on in. So number 5 is actually an arboreal tree-dwelling tarantula that hails from the rainforests of Guyana, as well as a few neighboring South American countries, and that is the Avicularia, or the pink-toe tarantula. So I know I'm probably going to catch some flack for including this tarantula on my list, but just hear me out. So for anyone out there who has never kept any members of the Avicularia species, or any tarantula for that matter, they do have a reputation for being somewhat more frail than the majority of beginner species, and that is a result of them being more sensitive when it comes to ventilation and humidity. However, if kept properly, they make for a beautiful and very intriguing display tarantula. Now, the first thing I love, not just about this species of Avicularia, but all of them, is just how fluffy and adorable they are. In addition to this, their metallic blue-green body and those bright pink foot pads just give them so much personality. One great thing about arboreal tarantulas is that they tend to be a lot more active than terrestrials, and also create a lot of webbing in their enclosures. Provide them with an enclosure that is taller than it is wide, as height is far more important with an arboreal than floor space. I give my Avix a large cork bark slab to climb on, as well as to serve as an anchor point for its web. Don't be alarmed if your pink toe doesn't web for some time. Out of the 3 I own, one has created a thick tube web in the top corner of her enclosure, while the second made a web, however seems to tear it down every time she molts, and the third isn't much of a webber at all, preferring instead to take shelter on the bottom side of her cork bark slab. Adults seem to take more time to settle in and start webbing than slings and juvies do, at least in my experience. One thing I have noticed with Avicularia is that they seem to do better in smaller enclosures with lots of branches and foliage. They do not like open space, and a larger enclosure is likely to leave them feeling stressed and exposed. Now, obviously you don't want to keep them too cramped, but considering that the majority of the species in this genus don't exceed 6 inches in leg span, a 5-gallon terrarium is generally suitable for adults. Just be sure to give them plenty of cross ventilation by drilling holes into the sides of the enclosure. Compared to most arboreals, which tend to be on the faster side, most Avix tend to be a good deal slower, which makes them ideal for beginners. Be warned, however, they are still capable of short bursts of speed, and they can and will jump, quite far I might add. Most of them are fairly docile, however some individuals can be quite skittish. They do possess urticating hairs, but they cannot be flicked and instead have to be pressed into the skin. Basically, when you pick one of these up, if it starts bobbing its abdomen up and down, it is trying to rub its hairs against you. The hairs of this genus are considered relatively mild compared to some others, but reactions are always going to vary from person to person. These guys are also notorious for their poo cannons, meaning that they will aim their abdomens toward you and literally spray their feces into your face. As far as upfront costs go, the Guyana pink toe, sometimes called the common pink toe, as well as the metallic pink toe, which is a slightly larger but still rather common cousin, can be purchased for around the $20 range as slings, and sexed female AAVIX can cost as little as $40, with Metallicas being a tad more at around the $50 to $60 range. At the end of the day, if you're looking for an adorable, colorful tarantula with lots of personality, and you aren't opposed to putting up with the extra challenges that come with keeping this species, the Avicularia or the Gawain Pinktoe may just be the perfect tarantula for you. At number 4, we have what has quickly become a favorite of mine, and that is the Efonopelma seemani, aka the Costa Rican zebra, or the striped knee tarantula. This is again one of those tarantulas that at first I was a wee bit reluctant to include on my list. The plus side about these guys is that they're ridiculously easy to care for. They do seem to appreciate a bit more moisture, being that they come from a rainforest environment, but are rather tolerant of drier conditions as well. Overall, just provide adults with a 5-gallon enclosure, with about 4 to 6 inches of substrate in either a cork slab or starter burrow, as well as a water dish, and they will be happy as a pig in, well, you know what. Now, these tend to be a lot more reclusive than most other Efonopelmas, and mine spends about 80% of her time in her burrow, which she has dug all the way to the bottom of her enclosure. Now, the one and only thing that keeps this tarantula from being higher up on my list is that they tend not to be the friendliest of spiders. While they're nowhere near as defensive as some of my old worlds, it's not uncommon for mine to throw a threat pose during a rehouse, and she has also kicked her urticating hairs at me on several occasions with very little provocation. They are also a good bit faster moving than your typical Brachypelma or Efonopelma, so this is not a species to acquire with the intention of handling one. In fact, while doing some routine maintenance on my girl's enclosure, this is what I was greeted with. As far as availability and costs go, these are extremely easy to come across at just about any exotic pet store, convention, or online breeder, and they are dirt cheap, with slayings being sold for as little as $20, and sexed females at around $50. So if you're looking for a tarantula that is colorful, easy to care for, and has just the right amount of spunk to it, this may be the right match for you. So at number 3, we have the Tilto Cattle albopilosus, formerly Brachypelma albopilosum, or the curly-haired tarantula. As I've mentioned before in past videos, there are 2 different variants of the species found in captivity. One hailing from Nicaragua, and the other hailing from Honduras. However, both variations are essentially identical in appearance and care, and make for an awesome display tarantula. Now, granted, this isn't exactly the flashiest of tarantulas. They are a bit dull and drab with their coloration, but you just gotta love that permanent bedhead look that they have. Also sometimes referred to as the woolly tarantula. The body hairs covering this spider are extra long and have a very distinct curl to them, which gives the T its name. These get to be a modest 6 inches in leg span, and while they will do quite a bit of excavating in their enclosures, mine tends to spend the majority of its time outside of its burrow in plain sight. This is one of the few tarantulas I will on occasion handle, as she has never thrown me a single threat pose, nor has she ever kicked urticating hairs at me. One great thing about this species is its amazing feeding response. Mine rarely turns down a meal unless she's close to a molt, and oh boy does she love to put on a show during feeding time. Similar to the striped knee, the curly hair comes from a tropical climate, and thus appreciates a bit of extra moisture, though they are very hardy and can tolerate drier conditions if necessary. Cost-wise, these are dirt cheap, with slayings being as little as $25, and sexed females can be purchased for under $100. They are also very commonly found and easy to come across. Numero dos. So for all you guys out there who love blondes, this may just be the perfect tarantula for you. Meet the Efonopelma chalcodes, or the desert blonde tarantula. Yeah, it's not the flashiest tarantula out there, but something about that goldish tan coloration just makes the species so darn attractive, at least to me. This is a smaller tarantula with females reaching about 5 inches or so. While they do a bit of digging and younger specimens tend to be more reclusive, as adults they will spend about 90% of their time out in the open, and most specimens are extremely laid back. Obviously, it's a big spider with big fangs and can deliver a painful bite if it's inclined to do so. However, they are very reluctant to bite, and unless annoyed for a particularly long amount of time, this is not something that you will have to worry about. These do possess urticating hairs like most New World tarantulas, but I have literally only once witnessed mine kick hers. The Efonopelma genus is the only known genus of tarantula that are native to the arid desert regions of the western United States. The chalcodes is found from Arizona all the way to northern Mexico. They are also a popular snack of the infamous and freakishly large tarantula hawk wasp, featured on shows such as Brave Wilderness. This is a slow-growing species, so I do recommend buying yours as either an adult or at least a juvenile. This is an extremely affordable tarantula as well, with slayings costing as little as $20, and sexed females can be purchased for under $100. Definitely get yourself a chalcodes. So I suppose, just since I mentioned the tarantula's name, I will include it as an honorable mention on this list, and that is the Grammostola rosea, or the Chilean rose-haired tarantula. Now, while this species certainly has its share of drawbacks, it does hold a special place in my heart, as this was the first tarantula I ever owned. For the longest time, this was considered one of the best beginner species out there. Unfortunately, this tarantula does not have the best appetite, and adults have been known to fast for several months at a time, which can understandably spook new hobbyists into thinking that there is something wrong with their spider, when in reality, it is just being a typical rose hair. Also, in my experience, they're not as docile as a lot of people make them out to be. In fact, this is the one and only T that I came close to being bitten by, back when I was a lot more naive about handling mine. Still a nice addition to the hobby, but you could honestly do a lot better with a number of other species as your first tarantula. Finally, at number 1, we have what is undoubtedly the most iconic of all tarantulas, and the one that all of you are likely the most familiar with, and that is the Brachypelma smithii or harmori, commonly known as the Mexican red-knee tarantula. If you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, these are the tarantulas that Harrison Ford got covered in during the opening sequence of that film. Although this is not a tarantula you would encounter in a South American jungle. In fact, you are a lot more likely to come across one in the scrublands of Mexico. As with some of the other species on this list, there exists a few known variants of the Mexican red-knee. There is the armori, which is the more commonly found variant, and then there is the slightly larger smithii, or the true form as some would call them. Both are drop-dead gorgeous tarantulas that achieve a pretty decent size of 6 inches or larger, and are hardy tarantulas with a mostly calm disposition, although some individuals can be skittish and quite handy with their urticating hairs. This species is a relatively good eater, although they will on occasion fast, so don't be alarmed if yours refuses food for a few weeks here and there. Just supply them a water dish, a decent amount of substrate, and a hiding place. While not as common in the pet trade as they once were due to certain laws making it illegal to collect them from the wild, captive bred armoris and smithies are still readily available. The prices on these guys can be a bit on the steep side though, with sexed females exceeding $200 sometimes. Slings are far more affordable, but the painfully slow growth rate almost makes it worth coughing up the extra cash it would cost to buy a juvenile or adult. Well guys, that about wraps it up for this one. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out my social too on Instagram, Facebook, and now I'm on TikTok too. So be sure to head over there and check out some of those videos. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Adios.